Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to the order to the Committee of the Whole meeting for June 24, 2020. So the first thing in our agenda is the Pledge of Alliance. So please stand up for the one that are there. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So second in our agenda is roll call.
I have note of all the alders present, and we do have a quorum, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So next in our agenda, I need a motion to approve the minutes for the May 27, 2020 meeting.
Motion to approve?
Second.
So who did it? Do you know?
Gabriella.
Yes, I got Gabriella and Joe.
Okay.
Randy.
Randy? Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Gabriella and Randy.
Okay, any question? All those in favor of approving say aye.
Aye.
Nays, the motion carries. Next is our agenda is public appearances for non-agenda items. Do we have anyone? No. Okay, we don't have anyone. So next we are moving to the topics for tonight. The first presentation will be by Eller's Capital to talk about the capital improvement plan presentation. And we have with tonight from Eller, Greg Johnson and Dave Ferris. So welcome guys again. So we are waiting for your presentation and go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. We're going to share our screen and go through the presentation that was provided to you.
If I could interrupt one real quick thing. So the presentation is saved out onto the iDrive for those of you that are in the council chambers under the agenda packets folder for committee of the whole. Those of you that are on Zoom, the presentation is out on the city's website under finance department.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask another question? Can Greg and Dave, can you introduce yourself because we have a couple of new alders?
Sure. My name is Greg Johnson. I'm a senior municipal advisor at Ellers. I've been with Ellers for the past 15 years. We've had the pleasure of working with the city of Fitchburg for many years. We're happy to be before you this evening. I'll let Dave introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Dave Ferris. I've been with Ellers about 2 years, but previous to that, I worked for Virtual Kraus for about 12 years as a municipal auditor, then 16 years as a finance director in Wanakee, and then crazily went back to Baker Tilly for 2 years of consulting, and then Ellers fortunately stole me away, and here I am.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to give you a little bit of background in terms of what Ellers does for the city, we work with the city in a variety of capacities. What we're talking about tonight is the financial management plan, which is something we present annually to the city to kind of provide a multi-year look at both your operating needs and your capital improvement plan into a comprehensive financial model. So that's what we're here to talk about this evening. We also assist the city with the debt issuance process when the city issues bonds or notes in the municipal securities market. We assist the city with that process. We're also involved in the city's tax incremental finance work in terms of ongoing management of TIF districts and reporting, as well as any creations or amendments to TIF districts. We've assisted the city with that process as well. And then we also assist the city as needed with some other debt management issues in terms of arbitrage compliance and post-issuance compliance regarding ongoing reporting. So we've had the pleasure of working with the city in a lot of different capacities. A lot of the areas we're involved with are interrelated. So there's a lot of synergy between the work in all these areas. So we're happy to be before you this evening to talk about the financial management plan. With that, really the objective of this presentation this evening is kind of threefold. One is to review several financial metrics that the city has in place through its financial policies. We're going to speak to each of those in terms of some of your policies regarding fund balance, debt management, tax rate for debt service, and a few other areas. We're going to go through the detailed long-range levy forecast that encompasses all of your levy-supported funds, the general fund, the library, capital projects, and then we've also modeled out debt service based on the capital improvement plan that's in place. And we'll provide a general assessment of the fiscal strengths and challenges that we see for the city to manage going forward. So we really view this model as kind of an all-in scenario. It takes into account continuation of your existing services from an operational standpoint, plans for some additional staffing changes in future years, then also shows full funding of your capital improvement plan. So this really is intended to kind of serve as a kickoff for your budget process that will continue from this point going forward, and certainly kick off in earnest in the fall. So we typically have used this presentation to kind of look at these long-range trends, look at kind of the full impact of both operations and CIP, with the understanding that you'll make some additional decisions and choices and prioritization as you go through the budget process. So that's kind of the context and kind of our approach and what we'll be discussing with you this evening. So I'm going to let Dave go through some of the key financial metrics and the operational model, and then I'll continue with the capital plan.
So we're going to go through some of the policies that the city has in place. The first policy is your general fund policy. Basically, the policy says that unassigned fund balance will be between 15 and 25% of the general fund annual revenues. And if you're new to the government world, unassigned fund balance is really your working capital. Sometimes it's called your rainy day fund, but really it's money that doesn't really have a specific designated purpose to it. It's used to pay your bills. And that amount that's usually set aside is somewhere about 2 to 3 months of bills, which is what your policy does. As you see the graph below, there are a couple different categories that fund balance is broken into, but unassigned is the bigger number. In 18, it dropped down quite a bit, and that was due to a one-time move of some money related to future retiree conversion of sick leave to cash or insurance premiums. However, due to some of the very good positive variances from actual to budget in the general fund this year, you had a pretty good year and basically recouped that difference. I know your policy says it's between 15 and 25%, and I believe staff usually moves excess amounts out to the capital fund if it's above those amounts. Is that correct, Misty?
Not exactly, but similar. So in the past, we've budgeted for a transfer specifically for expenditure restraint so that we don't lose that capacity. So it's not the amount over the policy. It's the calculated amount that has to be over the policy.
So you can see that the amount bumped up quite a bit, and as Misty said, there's an amount that's a calculation for expenditure restraint, which is one of your ways of protecting yourself if you don't actually make the expenditure restraint program. It gives you the funding source to fill that hole until you make it again. The next policy is the debt expense as a percentage of operating budget. So the target really is for your gross general obligation debt service. It needs to be between 15 and 25% of the combined general fund, library, and debt service expenditures. As you can see on the graph, 2019 had a pretty big spike, and the reason that is because there was cash available in TIF 4 to pay down quite a bit of the debt within that TIF. As it's getting close to closure, it had the money available to pay off that debt service. If you look at the years through the projection, which goes through 2030, though, the number stays pretty much right within the middle of that policy. The next policy is the debt service tax rate policy. The policy says that you will not exceed $2.25 per thousand of value. So on a $100,000 home, you're talking $225,000 of $1,000. So the average from 2020 to 2030 is $1.34 per thousand. In last year's in last year's plan, it was actually $1.25. However, you've got some fairly significant capital improvements that were added this year, and so that number bumped up a little bit because of that all-in, as Greg talked about, capital improvements. The next policy is a general obligation debt capacity, which is not to exceed 60% of statutory limit. The statutory limit for a government or for a municipality is 5% of your equalized value or your fair market value of the taxable property within your city. And so right now your limit is 60%, but the max that you hit in this plan with that larger capital improvement listing is 45%. Last year it was at 37%, but like I said, with that additional projects added, it kind of speaks to why that number went up. Going on to value growth, basically we projected future growth based on the mayor's budget. There is a couple of things that affected that as well. As you see in 2022, where we have the orange, the budget year 2023, that is, TIF 4 is projected to close, and that'll add about $222 million to the city's value. And in 2024 budget, TIF number 6 is scheduled to close, which will add about $102 million. And the town of Madison will also be coming on, and that's estimated to be about $114 million. So other than those 2 years, the projected growth that we used for the plan was what was in the mayor's budget. So the reason some of those numbers kind of look real low is because of some of the unknowns with the COVID pandemic. The construction being at an unknown, I think staff and we felt that it was good that these numbers be conservative because of those unknowns. So then going on to the operating forecast. We're looking at the general fund first. We have some assumptions that we used within the budget methodology for the schedule that you'll see a couple of pages on, actually on page 10 when we get to that. So a lot of things were held constant for revenues over the future years. Revenues within a municipality don't typically jump up and down. They're pretty consistent. You don't typically see a lot of growth in revenues in any municipality. But because of the pandemic, there's a couple things that were affected in the short term. We've decreased the building and zoning permits for 2021 and 2022 by 10%, and then that number is held constant through the rest of the projection. The court penalties and fines have been decreased 50% in 2021, and then that number is held constant through 2030. The Recreation Senior Center program is projected to decrease 50% in 2021, but then returning to those 2020 levels in 2022 and holding out from there. And then the room tax amount is reduced by $17,500, but recovers to the present day level by 2024. A couple of other revenue assumptions is that state aids will decrease approximately 5% for the next 2 years, and then that will be held constant through the rest of the projection, as well as interest income decreasing 10% in 2021, and then that amount being held constant. For the expenditure side, basically the departments that are primarily wage driven, they were projected to increase about 5% per year. So that has your wages, your fringes, and then the other expenditures would be about 3 to 4% projected increase on an annual basis. In the years where the TIF district closures come in, this was a time where the city could see that maybe there could be some additional staffing positions. So when TIF 4 closes in the 2023 budget, there's a projection of about $270,000 of additional staffing at that point. And in 2024, when TIF number 6 closes, There's some additional staffing that may be added, about 190,000. One of the things you'll see when we get to the levy limit worksheet is as that new value comes on, it basically frees up some levy limit room, and that's how you're able to add levy in those dates, and these costs could potentially fit in those years. So this is actually the schedule that when you take all the assumptions and we put Misty through the paces, she had to put together some of these projections, and a lot of those, basically those revenue and expenditure assumptions were ones that she came up with as she was putting this together. When you take all the things that she projected out, it pulls together in a schedule here that kind of shows how our revenues look and how our expenditures are going up based on those assumptions. And then really the difference that fills the gap is the local property taxes. This schedule doesn't show the local property tax at this point. That's a schedule that I'll touch on a little later on. But as you can see here, you're seeing about a 5% increase from about 2024 through the end. So about 5% is about the average expenditure increase. As you kind of noted through the assumptions, that 5% makes sense on those lines. Then the next fund that we also project out is the library, because they do have a tax levy as well. The amount of levy increase on this one was based on net new construction. With the increase in the expenditures at more of the 5% rate, you can see that the tax levy that's projected using net new construction doesn't necessarily meet the ability to zero out the expenditure needs. So that's something that obviously staff will work with the city council when you're preparing the budget, and you'll come up with ways to either fund those or make that expenditure budget fit. I'm going to turn it over to Greg for the debt and capital portion then.
So the chart here on slide 12 is a summary of the city's existing debt profile. So on the far left-hand side, under the total existing debt payments, that is the annual principal and interest payments that the city makes each year for its existing debt obligations that are outstanding. The city budgets several revenue sources to help repay that debt. There's revenue from a few of the city's tax-incremental finance districts, some other lease revenue, some special assessment revenue, and some impact fees, and then some other revenues that are applied and evaluated on an annual basis. So a portion of the city's debt service payments are paid by the property tax levy. These other sources are what we call abatements, which reduce the amount of debt service that's paid by the property tax levy. So the city's levy for debt service for the 2020 budget was approximately $4,139,000. So in that net tax levy a column on the far right-hand side, we show going forward what that projected levy will be just based on the city's existing debt profile. We'll look in a few slides at the impact of adding future borrowings for capital improvement projects in the CIP. But this kind of shows the existing debt profile and the levy without any impact of any future capital projects. On the next several slides is a summary of the projects that were included in the mayor's capital improvement plan that were proposed to be financed with general obligation debt. So we've listed the project under the project column. The project ID ties out to your capital planning documents. Then the year funded is the year or years that these projects will be funded in this model. In the revenue source column, we've identified what the revenue is being pledged to repay the debt service for each project. So the majority of the projects will be repaid through the property tax levy for debt service. There's a few projects attributable to the stormwater utility, which will be repaid by stormwater revenues. And then there's some other projects that will be attributable to tax-incremental finance districts. The amortization column shows the amount of years that each project is being financed over. So we try to match the amortization period to the useful life of the asset being financed. The funding source is identified whether it is funded through general obligation bonds or general obligation notes. The difference between bonds and notes is really statutory. It's the term of the financing. General obligation notes have a term of 10 years or less. Bonds have a term greater than 10 years up to 20 years under state statute. And then we show the amount of what's the estimated project amount and the year that is funded. So we've taken into account, the term in terms of the useful life and the amortization term of what's being financed, and then also statutory considerations in terms of what can be funded through notes and bonds under state statute. So this slide shows what's funded through 2025 on slide 13. And then we show on slide 14 the projects through 2026 through 2030. So the same information is noted, the revenue source, the term, and the funding mechanism that's identified in this financing plan. So in terms of the capital borrowings, the methodology, as I mentioned, we take into account the useful life of the asset and also what is bond eligible. If projects are financed with general obligation bonds, again, that has a term of 11 years or greater than 10 years up to 20. The state statutes identify projects that can be funded by bonds that don't trigger a mandatory referendum. As long as they are one of these enumerated purposes, you can finance them without having to conduct a formal bond referendum. Most core infrastructure falls under that category. Streets, utility improvements, all are eligible to be funded with bonds without having to have those bonds authorized through a referendum. We also take into account, the abatement sources for the debt service, so the stormwater utility revenues, revenues from tax criminal finance districts, and special assessments that are used to pay a portion of debt service for projects where a special assessment is levied. In a few examples, we've tried to combine the financings into a couple years projects into one financing, just to kind of reduce the amount of times that the city would need to go into the bond market. For example, 2028 projects were consolidated and funded as part of the 2027 financing, just to kind of consolidate the number of borrowings since they were smaller in those years individually, but together resulted in a bond issue size that was a little more appropriate for the bond market. So these are all the things we take into consideration when we identify how a particular project is financed. Each time the city goes into the securities market, we identify the projects that are being financed, and then I include the transactional expenses, the issuance expenses associated with going into the securities market. So under projects, we just have summarized, the individual projects that were on the detailed slides of the project list by just the general type of project and the repayment source, so whether it's paid by assessments, the tax levy, stormwater, sewer, or the TIP districts. And then we've identified estimated issuance expenses, a municipal advisor, that's us as Ellers, there's bond counsel, attorneys that provide legal opinions to make sure that the bonds are being issued consistent with IRS regulations and state statutes. The city has a rating from Moody's Investor Services. The city is presently rated AA1 by Moody's. That's one notch below a AAA rating. And then there's an underwriter's discount. That's the bank or underwriter that purchases the bonds, takes some compensation to purchase those bonds. So all those transactional expenses are built into the bond issue and paid out at the time of closing. Those aren't paid out of your operating budget, that's factored into the debt issuance. So we modeled borrowings for each year into notes or bonds based off of the project list and statutory considerations. So we've modeled those out all the way through 2030 based on the mayor's CIP as it stands presently. So understanding that this will be reevaluated as you go through your budget process, ongoing changes will be made. Again, we're just kind of taking the document as it stands presently, showing full funding of the capital plan in this document. So taking every project that was identified to be financed through debt, every project is included in this analysis.
May I ask a question?
In terms of looking
May I
at
ask a
the
question?
tax levy impact for your existing and your proposed debt, we've summarized that in this chart here on slide 18. Really want to focus your attention to columns on the far right-hand side under levy and tax rate. Everything to the left of that is your existing debt, and then all the principal and interest payments for all the proposed financings from 2020 to 2030. The columns identified in red are all the non-levy revenue sources that will be pledged to pay some of the debt service, assessments, TID revenues, sewer, stormwater revenues. So we really want to focus on that levy and tax rate column. So your existing levy for debt service, again, is approximately $4,139,000. On an equalized basis, that's about $1.35 per thousand. You'll see your levy change for debt service. The debt service levy for your 2020 budget increased by about $263,000. In terms of looking at all these capital improvement projects from now through 2030, we tried to structure the debt so there was a fairly consistent levy impact from year to year. So taking, again, all the projects are identified over the next 10 years. If those were all financed with debt, as based on the projects identified for debt financing in the CIP, the levy each year for debt service would increase by about $225,000 per year. So again, that's full funding of everything in the capital improvement plan. So you'll see by year 2032, the debt service levy starts to decline. That's really kind of the end of our planning model. We go out to 2030. If you issue debt in 2031, that would hit the debt service levy in 2032. So we built in a decline to account for debt service beyond this planning model. But again, this kind of shows, if everything was funded in the CIP as proposed with debt, that levy impact is about $225,000 per year, which is less than the levy increase for debt that you had in the 2020 budget. So again, that isn't how the debt necessarily has to be structured, but when we look at a multi-year model that goes out as far as 10 years, we're trying to structure that impact so it's consistent from year to year for planning purposes. Dave had mentioned one of the financial policy targets is utilization of your general obligation debt. Again, under statutory consideration, the amount of principal that you have outstanding for general obligation debt cannot exceed 5% of the city's total equalized value. So presently, your debt limit legally is about $171 million. You have about $48.2 million of debt outstanding, so you're at about 28% of your debt limit. This plan takes you up to about 45% of your utilization, which is below your policy target. That would leave you with $114 million of remaining borrowing capacity. This is really as much of a legal standard as anything else. We would never recommend that you utilize your full borrowing capacity. So you have a healthy amount of capacity remaining to fully fund your capital improvement plan, which just shows that you have the ability to fund the projects legally that have been identified in your CIP without putting an undue burden on your debt capacity. It's really more about affordability and the levy impact as opposed to utilization of your debt capacity.
Excuse me, gentlemen. It's very, very loud in here with the amount of rain that we're having. Could I get you guys to speak up as loudly as you can?
Sure. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dave, and he's going to walk through the tax levy and tax rate projections that incorporate operating funds, your capital project levy, and the levy for debt service that I just summarized.
Hey, Greg, may I ask a question? Can you hear me? I'm in the chamber. This is Gabriella. Greg, can you hear me?
We can hear you barely.
Oh, gosh. Can you hear me now, Greg? Yes? Okay. My question, going back to there we go. Going back a few slides, you talked about how you combine project funding in a certain year to avoid smaller borrowings in future years. So does that mean that we move projects up earlier in the CIP, or do we just borrow that money and then wait a year or two or whatever that project comes to fruition?
Yeah, so the 1 year that we did that was, your 2028 projects. We combined them into one financing in 2027. So that doesn't mean you have to do the projects a year earlier than how you plan for them. You can borrow for projects on an annual basis, or for example, in this illustration in 2027, we show that you would borrow for 2027 and 2028 projects in 2027. So you could still do the projects in each year that they were slotted in the plan, but you can combine and do a couple years worth of projects into one particular financing.
Okay.
Just based on the way the project costs were kind of identified for borrowing in the CIP, the project amount in 2028 was very small, so we just consolidated it into one financing, but that doesn't mean you'd have to change the timing of when you actually construct that project.
Are we able, and this might not be a question for you, Greg, but just in general, like, are we able to change the timing of projects if we have the funding for it earlier than anticipated, or is that something we typically don't do? Maybe that's for Aaron or Misty or Pat.
Yeah, so you could either change it now as part of the CIP process. The other thing I'll point out, though, is this is in 2028. That's a long ways from now, really, in the whole scheme of government budgeting. And I will bet that a lot of things will change between now and then.
Makes sense. I was just
unless
curious.
there's something that you are very passionate about that you want to accelerate, you obviously could through an amendment, but it's not something that needs to happen now to even things out.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so what this table represents is really, we've taken you through a few different schedules. We took you through the general fund projection. We showed you the levy on the top of that one. I kind of put you off until this slide for that, as well as the library. There's a capital projects levy that Greg talked about, and then the debt service levy either on the existing, which is what he talked about first when he started out on the borrowing, and then the new debt service, which is related to the projects that are yet to be borrowed for that will have a debt payment in the future. So your 2020 projects are the ones that show up on that new debt service line. So if we take those numbers and we accumulate those, we're showing you kind of what the change in the levy is for dollar purposes, and then we're trying to give you kind of a here's your projected equalized value, which is the table I talked about early on in the presentation. And that you take that dollar amount that the levy is divided by that equalized value, and that gives you the equalized value or equalized tax rate for the city for everything that you would levy for. The way that we've structured this, as we talked about, it is kind of an all-in. So in the general fund case, we've got the general fund basically having a balanced budget. As we get to the levy limit worksheet, you'll see that it isn't necessarily possible to increase your levy, the amounts that are in these schedules. So you'll see when we actually take this and we apply some more rules that the state has on us as far as limiting how much we can levy, how much we can increase our expenditures, that will kind of put you in a position where you'll have to make decisions in future years about how you will make that levy limit, because there's no way that you can't, you have to make it. They don't give you you can ignore it or anything. So you're always going to have to try to find a way to make that levy limit. And we'll show you that in a little bit. So as you look at the levy rate, though, down towards the bottom, really the levy rate does hold pretty stable over the first, I believe, 2024, because that's cut off on our screen. I can't tell if it's there. But you can see it kind of pops up in 2020. Let's see. To the wrong line. Sorry about that. So it kind of pops up a little bit by 2022, but then you see in 2023 and 2024 it kind of comes back down a little bit. And those are those equalized value years where those TIDs are closing and the town of Madison value comes on. So that extra value helps you be able to lower that tax rate. On the second page of the tax rate, you'll see that with the value only going up the 1-2% amount, you really can't keep pace with the growth of the tax levies to keep that tax levy smooth. So not only is the levy limit going to limit you as far as what you're doing, but probably when you're looking at this, even if you didn't have a levy limit, your rate was going up and up and up, that's probably something you're going to address anyways. But just so you know, based on the all-in effect of what we've showed you so far, that tax rate levy after 2024 will start to climb and keep going. So that'll be the things that you'll be addressing in the future budgets for that. This is a little bit of a better show of how the tax rate goes with what we had on the last page, a little bit more a picture instead of all the numbers, and numbers can drive people crazy. So as you can see, 2023, 2024 dips, and then that increase goes up pretty consistently through those years. And really the major contributor to that is that general fund levy, because you've basically limited the library to the net new construction. As you can see, the capital projects stays somewhat stable, does bump up every once in a while. And the other ones, the existing and proposed debt, actually the way that Greg has structured that, basically stays about the same rate combined throughout that. And then as far as the levy by purpose, you'll see that same kind of a deal with the proposed debt and the existing, that kind of balances out with that percentage that it uses. Same with the capital projects and the library. But as you can see, the general fund portion of the budget is creeping up, and that's because that one is growing by about 5% a year. So talking about the levy limit, excuse me a second. So there's some things to, I'll show you the numbers, but these are things that are considerations. Outside of the levy limit is the general obligation debt payments. So they're exempt from levy limits. Whatever the general obligation debt payments of the city are, can be added to the base levy limit amount that is typically for operating purposes. The recommended debt adjustment should not exceed the total levy for debt service. So basically the amount that you have for debt levy is typically what you would have. So if you have general obligation debt payments for all of the purposes that are funded by, either TIF or whatever, you wouldn't put, you tend not to put more than the levy down for what, you tend not to put on the adjustment line what you're levying for, because if you start using that amount that is basically the abated portion from those other funded sources, you actually start using money or start using levy towards things that may not be there in the future. If you didn't borrow anymore and you were depending on that abated debt, you may actually run into a problem where your operating levy has grown so much that you hit a wall and you'd end up being in trouble at that point. So that's something we tend to tell you, that if you're going to use any of your abated debt to help you out in a certain year, that it should be more for one-time type items like capital, but not something that you sustain and use for operating purposes. So in the levy limit forecast that we'll get to, you'll see that we, as of 2020, we actually do not use any abated debt in the schedule, but we do start to use some from 2021 through 2025, and there's still plenty amounts available. But as we get through 2026, you'll see from the schedule, and I'll show you the colors that I'll point you out to, is that we do not have enough money to be able to cover all of the levy requirements, even with the abated debt. So this is the schedule that we're talking about. So if you see the 2019 tax 2020 budget, you'll see in the pink that we have a little bit of capacity left through the 2020 budget, about $4,500. But as we go forward, based on those amounts that we have in this projection, where we're levying whatever it takes to fund the general fund projected expenditures, you see that we can't actually do that without dipping into that abated debt, which is the $539,000, and it continues to grow over time. Then, as we talked about, in 2026, you'll see where the green portion starts to show up, and that shows you basically that we need, in the pink, we need 4.3 million to actually pay for all the levy that we had projected in this projection, but we only have 3 million available. So you can't even use the debt adjustment or that abated debt to do it. So that 2026 would be obviously a period where, it just wouldn't work if you took that method on. But, I think what will happen is you're going to go through your budget process. You're going to find ways to make that funding work. Hopefully your growth comes in better than what we have projected here as well in those years, and you'll have more levy ability through the levy limit. But I think what this demonstrates is that basically the general fund levy amount that is in the projection isn't a sustainable increase, in that the city council has some decisions that they'll have to go through to actually be able to make the levy limits in the future.
So in terms of some just broad conclusions in terms of the 10-year model, if we look at the total levy increase, and that's your general fund levy, your library levy, your capital projects levy, existing and proposed debt, that all-in model that we've been talking about, the levy increase per year averages about 5.89% per year. As Dave just mentioned, it's going to put some levy limit pressure on the city in terms of being able to fund that under levy limits. You're allowed to increase your levy based on your percentage of net new construction, and then to increase it based on your general obligation debt service payments. As Dave just mentioned, as we get several years out into the model, you're starting to rely on the debt adjustments an amount that's greater than what we would recommend. So that means that there's going to be some pressure on either the general fund levy or the capital projects levy based on the amounts that are identified in the forecast plan. In terms of your policies that have been established over the years and how this 10-year forecast complies, your unassigned fund balance, of 15 to 25% of general fund revenues plus the prior year's state shared revenue or expenditure restraint payments. Your fund balance continues to be very strong. It's well above these policy ranges. In terms of Moody's and their rating factors that they take into consideration, there's lots of financial metrics that they evaluate over a multi-year period, but probably one of the ones they place the greatest emphasis on is your fund balance. The fact that the city's fund balance has been strong, stable, consistent is one of your credit strengths from Moody's standpoint. So that's, continues to be a key factor and is stabilized in this forecast model. In terms of the tax rate just for debt service, the city's policy again is that it would not exceed $2.25 per thousand. You're presently at $1.35 per thousand. If the CIP was fully funded, all the projects identified for borrowing, you would see that go to $1.44 per thousand. So a little higher than where you're at presently, but well under your maximum identified in your policy. And then we mentioned your geo borrowing capacity, not to exceed 60% utilization. The maximum you've reached here is 45%. So as we've mentioned, really the objective of this financial management projection is to really look at a comprehensive model that looks at both your operating needs and your capital needs, integrates it into an overall levy projection so you can see the projected tax rate and impact on a typical home in Fitchburg over the next 10 years. As we've mentioned, there's some levy limit challenges which are present based on the forecasts that are in this model, so that will require some additional prioritization and decision-making as you go through your budget. The good news is you're well within some policy thresholds for debt issuance and tax rate impact and capacity. But they'll, as the city has done historically, continue to look at your operating and capital levy amounts as well to make sure that you can remain within levy limits. But all in all, the city has, a very strong track record in terms of its budget and financial management. As I mentioned, very strong rating with Moody's. So we certainly try to help the city identify policies and tools to keep that good track record and those policies in place going forward. So with that, we're happy to revisit any subject you want us to touch on in any more detail or answer any specific questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. So do we have any question? Okay, I'm gonna ask the first question. So how do you compare us with other municipalities from the same size like us financially? How we are, we are average, we are better than average. I don't know, you ran those models. Huh?
I would definitely say you're better than average. I mean, I think the fact that you're at a AA1 rating, which is very high, just one notch below AAA rating, and the fact that your financial position is very stable due to the fund balance that you have. The city has very strong cash and liquidity that you can, sustain financial challenges. I think, every community right now is certainly experiencing some financial pressures with COVID-19, but the city is very well positioned due to your fund balance and your liquidity to help manage that, in addition to, just the general operational and budget adjustments that staff has been making along the way. I think when we look at how Moody's rates the city, which is kind of an independent, third party that rates, and evaluates municipalities, not only Wisconsin, but nationwide, you score very favorably and certainly above average. So I think that, the city has a very strong, financial track record, very stable. And I think, we're trying to certainly look at that and maintain that track record going forward. You certainly have, decisions to make and prioritization to make in terms of operating services and capital projects, which aren't unique to any other community, but I think the city has done an excellent job of making those decisions and being good stewards of taxpayer money over the years. That's been well reflected in your independent assessments by Moody's.
And I want to add on to it also is that, I worked at a municipality for 16 years and I had, a lot of the similar policies in place, but some of the things that I've seen that Misty and the city staff have done to ensure some security or some flexibility on how year to year goes, whether it's if you don't make the expenditure restraint process. I think you have staff on hand that really understand how to keep the city's financial really in good shape. So that's off to them.
And I think the fact that you go through this planning model every year certainly is beneficial as well, because I think hopefully it alerts you to some pressure points, things that need to be fair watching and kind of be planned for, certainly from a levy limit standpoint. But it also shows what the potential is in terms of funding operations and funding capital projects. I think your CIP has some larger what we call legacy projects included, some facility improvements, which all communities face at some point in time. They're not regular things that communities undertake, but communities have assets that need to be maintained or replaced, and some of those are identified in your plan. And so we're trying to structure your debt service payments and your levy impact so that can be affordable within a levy range that's you've been consistently at. So I think when we looked at your full funding of your CIP, the fact that levy increase, at least for the debt components, that levy increase was no greater than what you had for debt service in your 2020 budget, even with some larger capital improvement projects, because those are kind of coming due in your long-range planning, I think shows that you've got some flexibility. But a lot of communities aren't as well positioned to take those on if they're not doing this long-range planning. So this from our perspective, this has a lot of benefit because it enables you to better plan for some capital or operational expenditures that maybe will be, you'll be facing in a few years if you're planning for them in advance. I think that both your staff and you as elected officials can make better decisions if you're looking at these things in a multi-year perspective. So we appreciate the time and effort that the city devotes to this each year because we hope it helps make better decisions and see, areas that you can work on in advance of those becoming, more of a concern.
Okay, any other question? Okay, I have another question. So, so because we know we are under a pandemic, I know that one of my concerns is that some stream of revenues that we usually get, eventually maybe they are going to be reduced, and you mentioned that in your representation. So have you considered in the plan adjust the abate debt service that eventually maybe we need to absorb with more than with tax levy, you know what I mean, in the future? If those stream of revenue are decreasing and then we have all these big legacy projects that we need to take on, and then eventually, so that one is one of my concerns. And the second question that I want to incorporate with that is, because we are going through this uncertainty, do you think that is feasible in the next couple of years to go ahead with all these big legacy projects that we have? You know what I mean? So
In terms of the kind of the impact of, maybe some declining revenues that we had mentioned, particularly in your operating budget with, some state aid declines and maybe some building permit revenue declines, that will more impact your general fund and your operations. In terms of the debt and financing, all the infrastructure projects, some of the facility projects, really the revenue sources that offset most of your debt service payments. The majority of those are related to your tax incremental finance districts. So we look at those, annually to kind of make sure that, the increment value is being maintained at a level that can support the debt service payments. I think that's, in terms of the debt model, that revenue source is the biggest driver of the impact of whether or not any of those projects will shift to the property tax levy. For example, some of the projects here in near term that started last year that are continuing in 2020 are some of the Fitchburg Road improvements. A portion of those projects are paid through, debt service support by the property tax levy. A portion of that project is attributable to TID District number 10. And so, as the first round of Fitchburg Road projects were financed last year, a portion of that was assigned to TID 10. It's anticipated that, the remainder of that project will be financed later this year with a split between it being levy and TID supported. I think we'll likely be financing these projects after the next increment values get certified by the Department of Revenue, which is in August of every year. So we'll see that latest valuation for TID 10 to see if it can support that next round of Fitchburg Road projects. So, but, we look at it now when we're kind of planning for projects. We look at it again when you're authorizing debt and considering moving ahead with those projects to make sure that we're not being overly aggressive in terms of forecasting that TIF revenue. When we update the TIF models in terms of new value that we're projecting, we're really looking at a 12 to 18 month horizon. That's really the window of time that we're forecasting new value, because we want to rely on, projects that we know are in the works or are in the process of being approved. We're not relying on necessarily development to in future years when we're really looking at the impact of financing projects. So when we amend districts, we'll look out over a longer period, but when we're making financial decisions, we really narrow that window down and try to make sure that we're being conservative with our increment projections to reduce the reliance on property tax levy.
Okay. Any other question? Come on, people, this is your opportunity. No?
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm curious, so this, I guess I'm just curious about how Ellers works with the city. Is this an ongoing relationship with Misty, or is it something that you do once a year, or is this because of the capital improvement? I'm sorry, I'm not clear exactly, because I guess what I'm trying to get at is, we're going through the capital improvement process right now. There's potentially going to be amendments. Are we going to update this analysis if there are changes? Or is this something that's done, like, what's the order of steps here?
So I can take that one. So generally what happens is we do this financial management plan just based on the mayor's proposal. And then next year, all the amendments that you guys have approved that are changed, they will be incorporated in next year's financial management plan. Again, because it's such a long time frame that we're looking at, there's time to kind of do those iterations as we go.
Okay, and so it's done in advance, so it kind of gives us a sense of how to move forward with the CIP process? Is that kind of the reason why we look at this at this point? Okay, so we have a better sense of...
I think of this as like the baseline. So
Okay.
yes, it's based on the mayor's proposal, but then this is also the baseline going into the operating budget.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. If I don't hear any other comments or question, I think we are done here, and I want to thank Greg and Dave for your presentation. As always, very entertaining. So thank you very much for your support and for your guidance, and so thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so next in our agenda, we have the future funding of Fitchburg Access Community Television. So we have the manager, Jeremy Crosby, with us. Okay, Jeremy.
Thank you. I've got a quick statement, and then we'll go through the presentation here. So bear with me as we go through this. So first off, just want to say good evening to Common Council, Mayor Aaron Richardson, and the residents of the city of Fitchburg. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jeremy Crosby, and I'm the Community Media Services Manager for Fact TV. I took over the role in 2013, starting here in 2010. So been here a few years, and as you'll see, a few years of some major changes in the last 10 years. We'll get into that. But honored to serve the city and the residents of Fitchburg. I come before you today to talk about Fitchburg Access Community Television, or Fact TV, and the challenges we've overcome, the roles we've performed for the future that we foresee, and to pose a major question for your consideration regarding Fact TV's continued contribution to this city. I'm indebted to the past and present staff, administrators, mayors, and councils throughout the years. You have been committed to the services of Fact TV as we've provided just great service to the residents here in Fitchburg. With your continued support, we have helped not only have increased our meeting coverage, been able to step up with helping other departments with their outreach and projects as assigned, provided production services to our local businesses and school districts, and have started a community news show, not only in English, but now in Spanish, coming up on a year, which is fantastic. Again, just being around to help out in any way possible. And you'll hear this message from me tonight, really connecting, be that connecting factor for the city, trying to keep everybody connected here. Fact TV services are second to none, and I'm not just saying that just because I can. We are doing things that other communities are not, and that the city of Fitchburg is unique in so many ways, as you know, with our 3 school districts, very diverse city, geographical opportunities that we have here. We've stepped up to be that center piece to connect everybody. What Fact TV is facing ahead for its funding sources is not just limited to our city. In fact, all cities across Wisconsin and this great nation are facing a decline in funding sources for many different reasons. Tonight, you have one big question in front of you, and it's the question of funding. And this is just the beginning of what we can do for our city, so we're looking forward to talking about this tonight and appreciate your time as we go through this. So I did put out this presentation into, and I'm sorry I got in there a little bit late, but this is out there on the iDrive if you did want to follow along here. And then I know it is up online for everybody to see. So what is Fact TV? What are the services that we offer? This presentation will be in 3 parts. A quick overview of Fact TV, where we're at with the funding, and we'll talk about the future at the end. So as far as our community media goes, it was called Community Television, or PEG. That stands for Public Education Government. In our case here, we've had 3 channels that were kind of dedicated to public education and, and government. So that's kind of been our structure, but basically we're here to provide access to the community, both for school districts, for government, and then for public access. And that's where that PEG piece comes in. As far as how Fact TV aligns in the PEG world, as mentioned, we kind of put our first channels when I came here. We're a little bit messy, and we'll talk about that. But we turned our first channels into public education government. That's actually what we called our 3 channels before we got into what it is today. We are different than other PEG stations because of the 3 school districts. A lot of PEG stations, the city operates a government channel. School districts will operate their education channel. And then some even, Madison, if you're familiar with YOU, was a public access channel operated strictly by residents of Madison that's where the funding was going to, and they were operating that. Here, Fact TV is doing everything. So because we don't have a school district, we have to provide educational program. We have to create that. Government, we cover all the meetings, so it's pretty easy to fill that one. And media, we'll get to that. How is Fact TV funded? It's funded by franchise fees. Franchise fees come from cable companies, something I talked about during CIP. But we have here Spectrum, AT&T, and TDS in our city, and that's where the franchise fees are coming from. Up until last year, they were paying 5% franchise fees, and we've been receiving all of those fees at this time. I know the question came up about satellite companies. They do not have to pay any franchise fees. And I don't know that anywhere in the U.S. that's set up to do that. So we don't broadcast out to them either way. And then in December 2007, the state legislation passed the Video Compensation Act, which eliminated, some cities had PEG fees along with franchise fees. There was an additional fee you could assess as a city. From what I can tell from the records, and Tom can correct me on this one, I don't think we actually charged a PEG fee. We only had the franchise fees back then, so it didn't really affect us, but some of the channels or stations like ours shut down because they were only funded by PEG fees, but that was eliminated. So what do you guys do in there? I think we're the department on the other side of the hall, so some people may wonder what's going on over there. And I can sum it up to this. It's a ton of government meetings. No surprise. We kind of live and breathe with you guys day in and day out for your meeting coverage, which is awesome. I mean, we are a very transparent city, which is very fortunate for our residents. So we're glad to be here, and just make sure you say hi to the guys every once in a while. Let them know that you're here too. Multiple daily newscasts. We really turned our focus into community news, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But our emphasis has been, what can we do to get information out to the residents from not only City Hall, but from what's happening in our city, and a local news program has kind of fit that mold very well for us. with Talking Fitchburg, if you've ever seen it. And we do need to interview you all. Tom, talking to you. Get you on the show if we can real soon. We also instruct, insist, and encourage residents to develop their own programming. Our station is open for anybody who wants to come in and create content. Although with YouTube, Facebook, and every other social media and the cell phones in everybody's pocket, it doesn't really draw a lot of interest here in the city of Fitchburg. Other communities may have a larger presence of volunteers. Ours just hasn't really had that. I think the 3 school district piece definitely plays a role into that, but for whatever reason, we just don't have it. So it's up to our staff to create that content, and that's what we're filling it with is news. We do coordinate and produce multimedia content for all city departments and create full programs for local events, chamber activities, public safety functions, and more. Pretty much, if something's happening in Fitchburg, you'll probably see a Fact TV camera out there covering it. Looking at the history piece here, not going to bore you too much with the details, but I did want to kind of give you an overview from what I've been told from previous managers, some of the history we've had, and some of the alders that have been here for a while can fill in any of the details if I'm missing something. But 1990 to 2010, from what we know, Fact TV was located or did operate in the old City Hall on Fish Hatchery Road. 2 government meetings were regularly covered. As years went on, more meetings were covered and added to the list. Event coverage grew over the years as well, both staff, and there was a lot of volunteers at one point for Fact TV. I mean, that's how the events were getting covered, was a lot of community involvement. Again, way before the cell phone age and social media, so I think that definitely played a role into the development of that. Kids programming was also very popular. We ran a lot of kids classes, especially in the 2000s, even into up until a couple years ago, we were still working with a lot of kids in the community. Super important piece, and hoping to get back to that in the future. Fact TV was moved over to the community center before being moved into City Hall in the current location. Infrastructure of the community center and City Hall was well planned out with cable runs to both rooms. And basically today, when you're on this campus, we're connected to all the buildings. So if something's happening here on the campus, we can broadcast it live pretty easy. On the forefront planning of past directors and council has been awesome for that infrastructure. Late 2000, broadcast technology was changing fast as well, and that also came with some steep costs, and that'd be your SD to HD world. It was a very tough and costly decision to be made. And in fact, when I got here, we were still broadcasting on VHS tapes, and that takes us into 2010 when we stepped in here. The director at that time, 25 plus years here. There were 2 full-time, 3 part-time employees. 3 channels were up on the cable system. Unfortunately, only 1 channel was broadcasting, and the 2 others were playing identical programming. So we weren't really functioning at a full capacity to what we could be doing at that time. As I mentioned, we did have VHS tapes, DVD players, and outdated computer-controlled electronic system. And in fact, in our early days, we actually had to change the tapes out and the DVDs out from the morning program to the afternoon. So somebody physically had to press the DVD player or rewind the tape and put in that afternoon or morning program. So pretty crazy. We did fix that and make that a little bit easier. Meeting rooms had manned cameras, so in council chambers here, it took sometimes up to 3 to 4 employees to cover a meeting. Before COVID hit, I mean, we were doing 1 person covers the meetings, which was important for us, but something to stand out that every camera was a manned camera. We didn't have remote cameras or anything like that in the 2010 era. Eventually, we would build up on that. Our department, it took several months to get it cleaned out in 2010 as we transitioned, cleaned up, and started over. Basically, in 2010 was the beginning and what we called in our annual report, the rebuild of Fact TV. That was kind of the restart, if you will, of Fact TV from the ground up. So everything, we were talking with one of the old directors today, we're talking thousands and thousands of VHS tapes, even figured they say, a couple thousand in the basement. It took us quite a while to move out and get everything cleaned up and moving forward. As we move through the years, 2010 through 2020, each year here now I'm going to kind of go year by year because this is the important piece that you know that franchise fees were on the rise. At the same time, we were building infrastructure and developing our internal processes. So 2010, and you'll see the revenue costs are on the slide here. Capital costs for that year and operational costs are on the screen as we move through each one of these years. So new manager was hired, construction began, live streaming was actually put in for the first time in 2010, which is really good thinking on the council at that time for adopting us streaming software. There's still stations across the state that don't even live stream at this point. So to be there at 2010 when people were just starting to get involved with that is pretty cool, along with video on demand that came with that streaming stuff. A new classroom space was added. You can see on that picture on the left that does show the head end before we put in the new head end. So you can see the VHS tape players on there. And yes, that is a tube TV sitting there. It was very interesting to get things kicked off. That said, we were able to put in the new system, which allowed us not to have to actually put in a physical tape into the unit. It was all digital files putting in and programming. And if I don't say it now, I won't. You should come and visit us and take the tour. Let us explain how it all works. It's a 24-hour-a-day operation. Even if we're not there, it's always running. So it's a pretty cool system that I'd like you to see. 2011, new remote control cameras were added in here. So if you look around the council chambers here, you'll see our remote cameras, and especially all across this campus. This allows us to, again, move down to a one-person operation, save staff costs, and we were able to move up on the meeting coverage. So that's what allows us to cover all these meetings is by having one person and multiple cameras. This space has been built to handle, has the most cameras by far, but also the most technology in it. So we like when you have meetings in here, Mr. Mayor, and keep having them in here because it's the room that's set up with the best technology to cover what's going on here. But all that said, in 2011, that infrastructure was updated. New lighting and switching system was also added to the Fitchburg Room, and I believe that was the same time the community center, senior center expansion was going on, kind of tied into that project. 2012, studio cameras, audio system here in the council chambers. You can see that it's kind of hard to see there, but there's a side-by-side picture of our microphones to begin with. They were actually, like the mayor is leaning in right now, is how you would have had to talk into a microphone. They weren't actually set back towards you. So audio in here was pretty hard to hear. Also, the speakers were right here on the ground, so when everybody got into the council chambers, it'd be hard to hear. So we added in the system that's above you, and then the placement of the mics is strategic. I know it's not always the most grateful piece you have here, but it is there for you so we can hear you nice and clear. And this is your reminder, talking to the microphones. We want to hear you. And the staff should tell you that too, tell you to talk into that. This system is pretty cool because it does have not only the control out here, but we also have control of your microphones. So if you forget to turn them on, we can turn them on. We also have a separate system that is specifically for broadcast. So the audio in here could be adjusted separately to what our TV audience, which is important because if you have it all in one, if you turn one up, it all goes to you know what. So it's a pretty nice piece that we put in here that came with a study and input from the council at that time before this system went in. But that was a pretty big year. 2013, council chambers, the big screen that you see to my right here, we actually had a smaller screen in here. And so we got the big video screen, also added in spots in here so you could plug in HDMI or VGA. We had a projector that sat on the floor in here that you would have to plug your computer to in this area. So trying to eliminate cords and all that, definitely a big thing. And again, following with the technology, putting an HDMI in here was a big thing. So that came in here as well as audio system up in the library. We do have a control room in the library, the community center in here in City Hall. 2014, we're starting to now, this is kind of the beginning of transitioning to more of the internal structure of Fact TV. While we were building the infrastructure in our buildings here, we're also at the same time trying to develop our processes internally. So leading up to this, we're going out and covering all city events. We're just taping them, editing them, putting them out on the channel, and that's how we did things. You know, we're shooting 200 plus meetings plus another 200 plus, you know, what we called shows at the time. That's changed now to more of a regular TV viewing, but we were still out there covering community events, but really trying to get that piece going. That's when Talking Fitchburg came about. So when we decided that a news show would be the better route to get information out. Before Talking Fitchburg came out, we would go out and tape an event. It might not be put out on air for 2 to 3 to 4 days. Now, when we go out and do something, we shoot it, it probably gets out in the next day or day and a half. So it's really important for us not only to go out and film something, but also understand the timeliness of an event to get it out there so people can see themselves, share it, get it out there. Also important for Talking Fitchburg, it falls in between the newspaper, which comes out once a month, what City Hall puts out, or City of Fitchburg puts out on their website. We kind of fall right in between that. Even though we're a government entity, we're in City Hall, we can put out news daily that the newspaper, you know, will put out in a month. We can get it in a day or the next day. So it's really important for us and why we moved to that news program. And now at this point, we're doing Talking Fitchburg every day, plus we're doing news updates in the morning and in the afternoon. So basically from 9 until 5:30 p.m., you're getting up-to-date news every single day here in the city of Fitchburg if you were tuning into Fact TV. And we're posting that up on Facebook and onto YouTube and through the website and out to the channels. We are well established for getting the information out as many ways as possible so people can get the information, and that's also very important to us. So big turning point there in 2014. 2015, we see the Talking Fitchburg moves out of my office. So you saw in the other picture was in my office to start with. We didn't want to put, our group was young, so we didn't think sitting behind a news desk and telling the news was a good idea. So it's always been in a podcasting look to be a little bit more easy to understand. It's supposed to be a laid back show, and if you watch it, and yes, I am the host of it, I'm sorry up front. Trying to do my best. But you know, it's supposed to be lighthearted and not so newsy, if you will. So trying to provide out as much information, what's happening in our community, that's super important to us. So the Fitchburg Room, if you've been down there, that's in the community center, is a studio space for us. So we actually built with the folks from the building staff here helped us build this set. So we had a set that we would set up and take down every single day. We did that for a couple of years, and eventually that's a multi-purpose space, the Fitchburg Room, and it was just too much for us, so we ended up moving that studio back into our office, which we'll get to in just a second here. But that was kind of the beginning. Also, social media, we were able to get on Facebook and YouTube. The initial social media policy was one account for the city, so not every department had one at the beginning. It was one account, and that changed over the years. So it was nice when we all could get it. I understand the reasoning to limit that, but that was very important for us and a turning point there. 2016 was our first upgrade system to the head end. So the first head end piece that we did put in was a standard definition system. That was 2010 was still in the transition time. It was way more expensive to buy HD and put in HD service at that point. So we had a full SD service converted to HD. I would note that none of the cable providers, and at least for us currently, do not offer us to broadcast in HD. Cable companies are not really willing to work with us on that front. It's more cost for them, and they don't want to absorb any of those costs. So we broadcast fully HD except on cable TV. So if you tune into the website, you tune into Roku, Apple TV, any of those, that's the full HD quality. You turn on the TV, I'm sorry. We don't have any control over that. Once it leaves our head end, it's immediately downgraded but to be sent to them, and then the signal can be TDS with coming in 2016. They did bring a little bit better of a signal. It's still not a full HD signal, but TDS wasn't in our area until 2016. So they are a new provider here, but they are in a very small part of the city so far. So it's not a big area. We'll talk about that coming up. 2017 assistant manager position was created. And that's the guy to your left over there, Scott, the bank robber. He has been a great help when we're talking about that infrastructure internally with the structure of Fact TV. I was basically morning, noon, and night as the manager, and it's hard to be here 24 hours a day, plus be home with the family. So part of our planning for funding and whatnot called for a new position, and we presented that year, and we're able to get Scott in here, and he's done a great job. I'm glad to have him on here, and all of our staff truly has been phenomenal in all the work they've done. And showing here in 2017, part of what we do with helping other departments, we were able to build a AV system for the senior center downstairs. So if you've been in the senior center, seen their 75-inch TV or whatever is down there in their AV system. We were part of the build of that. So not only do we do TV side of things, we also do AV help. You know, we're your basic AV department, plus marketing, plus website, plus graphic design, plus whatever comes with multimedia. So serve many different roles here as far as what we do. 2018, we hired an outside marketing firm to work on the advertising and marketing piece. We set up, again, a schedule that was similar to what you would be watching on a regular TV station. So we interject commercials into our community channel. We didn't have any takers in buying advertising. What you'll find out is cable companies don't provide you with numbers. So we don't have Nielsen ratings. We don't have how many households have these boxes in there. They don't have to provide it. They won't give it to us, so we don't know who's really watching out there. We can find out from the online viewing and social media and that stuff, which is in our annual reports for who's out there watching. But as far as cable companies go, we just don't know who's really watching it. We just know that the numbers are going down because people are cutting the cord, and we'll talk about that too. But that plan came with a show called Inside Business, so it was our chance to go and talk with the businesses, tell them about Fact TV, offer them a 10-minute free spot to talk about the businesses of Fitchburg, and that show still continues today. And again, we just go out, tell them what we have, offer them some advertising services, and then shoot a short segment with them and put a show together, and Scott does a great job with that show if you haven't checked it out. We've done Rolling Pin,
UPS store, Odessa's,
Quivies.
make Quivies.
Talk into microphone, Scott.
Sorry.
In Yahara Bay, just to name a few. But that year, if I remember right, I think I hit 25 businesses, went and met with 25 businesses, offered this up, and those were the takers that we had at the time. So it was one of our funding pieces, and again, we'll talk about the things we've done with funding, but important to share that with you. And again, we moved, in 2018, we moved our Talking Fitchburg studio back into our office here to save time, staff time on having to set up a makeshift studio every day. Just was becoming too much of a hassle for us. So we haven't given up using the Fitchburg Room. We use it for bigger productions. So we call this Office Space Studio 1 and that one Studio 2 over there. And we can still do studio work. 2019, real quick here, we started the over-the-top television. That's Apple TV and Roku. That's important. Again, trying to reach as many residents in as many ways as possible. So this is part of the system that we had already have in our office. We were able to add this feature on it so people could watch through the same thing that's killing franchise fees. So kind of ironic in a way that we add something that also hurts us at the same time. But it's our goal to reach all the residents as many different ways as possible there. Also starting the Spanish news with Lapita and Julia, both volunteering their time to do the Spanish news. So we appreciate that. And that show continues on. And we did pick up this piece here that's a broadcasting piece, so we can really be in any part of the city and do live broadcasting. So thank you to the internet and everything else in between. We're able to bring you not only breaking news, but other events as they're happening across the city. We can broadcast those, get that signal back to here, and then put it out to all of our areas. And that allowed us to do football. So we started with football last year, did Verona games live, and then did basketball, both boys and girls basketball. Aaron blew me off on being an announcer, made me do it myself. So if you want to be an announcer, Tom, looking at you. You and I could be a good team, just saying. Tom and Jeremy and Tom. Any questions on the history? That I realize that's not what we're really here to talk about, but it's important that you know that really in the last 10 years, we spent the time not only building the infrastructure, updating it, getting it so we can continue that on to today, but also internally, we've had to continue to figure out what's the best way to reach our residents. So not just stick in one path, keep our options open, and I'm proud to say that with the staff that we have, there's 5 of us, to put out a daily newscast, cover 200 plus meetings, help the staff here in the city of Fitchburg, or city staff. We are busy every single day, and I don't know why the guys keep coming back, but I'm sure glad that they show up every single day to help us keep going. So really appreciate all the support here for Fact TV. So the nuts and bolts here of funding, we'll go right on to slide 19 here. Our revenues include the franchise fees. Those, again, are coming from AT&T UVerse, Spectrum, which was Charter, and TDS. Public revenues, we do have the video production services, so people can hire us out to do production work. Verona Area School District is one of those that is contracting a lot of services with us. We have kind of an agreement that if it's more on the education side, need to get the information out there, obviously we'll go and do that for free, but if it's more of their internal project work, we're doing that paid service. We have DVD sales, memberships, if people want to be members. We only have 2 members currently that are part of Fact TV. Those will be outside community producers, and then the advertising, which again just hasn't been as successful as we were hoping, and I think it's because the ROI of that is really hard to measure for the businesses. Not saying we're giving up on it, but so far it just hasn't worked out as well as we hope. Interest revenues and P-card, that's in Misty's world, so she can update you on where those come, but those are revenues that we have. And again, there's no tax dollars at this time being put into this department. It's only coming from these revenues that are on the screen here. As far as franchise fees go, cable TV franchise fees, main revenue, as I mentioned, the fees are collected by the cable companies and then distributed quarterly, so we get those in quarterly. And historically, they have been dropping over the last several years. Of our 3 cable providers, Spectrum has the most coverage area, so they obviously have the highest revenues, and you'll see that coming up here. AT&T UVerse and TDS are both in pretty limited spots of our city. They're not everywhere. I don't know if they're going to expand. They haven't told us one way or the other, but if they do, great. If not, we'll deal. Next slide. So looking at the revenue and expense summary, this is looking at 2009 through 2019. Again, comparing to what I just talked to you guys about in the 2010 to 2019, we had, again, a lot of infrastructure. 2016, you see the expenses go up. That's the year we upgraded to HD, so that was the first replacement of our head end area, so that's where you're seeing those expenses. But as you can see, expenses are going up and the fees are continually going down. They were going up pretty steadily, but as we know with cable cutting and whatnot, and we'll talk a little bit about that here, that's really chewing into to the fees, and we're seeing that drop. Maybe it'd be interesting to see with COVID and see what happened this year if more people bought service, but that would be an anomaly at this point. So declining franchise fees, a couple of reminders here from 2007 to 2019. We've had a franchise fee of 5%. That's applied to the gross receipts of the cable provider. Again, there's service expense and increase in alternatives to cable TV has led to the cord cutting, and you hear about that all the time, cut the cable or cut the cord to go to those other alternatives, and that is certainly affecting that. Cable companies do not provide any information or numbers or subscriber information. We can request it, but they do not have to fulfill that. And then TDS, as I mentioned, you're going to actually see their revenues are continuing to go up. They just came into the city, so people are buying into it, so their numbers are steadily increasing, but we're not talking about a lot at this point. Last year, to add insult to injury, at the state level, another legislation piece was passed, and it was Wisconsin state legislation to reduce video service provider fees. This means that the VSPs, or those provider fees, would be cut down to 4% by the end of 2021. So cutting into what was already the 5%, they're nailing it, moving it down. So to offset that, the state on 24, thank you, the fee percent basically this year goes down to 4.5, and then in 2021 it will go down to the 4%. But the state, on the flip side, is going to pay off the difference, taking the gross receipts from 2018 for this year as a payback. So we're getting $31,650. That's what's anticipated here for that fee to be paid back to us. And then as you look at 2021, the fee percentage, as I said, will go from 4.5 to 4.0, with the state of Wisconsin replacing that lost revenue from the gross receipts from 2019. So if you're basically, what we would call this is a wash, or it's never going to get back to what it is. We're seeing a lot of construction here, so something that we had been talking with Misty about is maybe with the construction going on in Fitchburg, we would see more people, more potential for people to buy service. But with this piece going into place, that kind of really hinders that, because it will be at 4%. Go down to 4%, and then moving on, the state will pay the 2019 piece up to 2029. So they'll pay, we'll get a payback, basically, the same payback from 2019 up until 2029, then it's 4%. And there's no certainty that they'll stick to this plan, and we don't know what will happen in 2029. My overall piece here in slide 26 is that franchise fees will go away. I don't think there's any, the cable companies aren't interested in partaking or participating. They keep dwindling it down. We're going to, 5G, cell service. So the infrastructure that was put in the ground, eventually that mobile technology will surpass anything that's in the ground, even fiber, in my opinion, and we won't get fees on that. And at the national level, they've eliminated what was the right-of-way. I mean, the reason that we were getting franchise fees, which I probably should have mentioned at the top there, was it was the right-of-way to run cables through the city, right? That's what the franchise fees was for, but they've eliminated that, and allowing 5G to go up anywhere and everywhere. And that's why I think you hear a lot of anger about 5G, because they can basically do what they want. Again, Jeremy's editorial, not actual, but that's the sum up there. So slide 26, cord cuttings, we've got just a couple of articles here that research showed that cable companies lost 455,000 plus subscribers in 2019 in the second quarter. We know that this is going down. There is no doubt about that. Cable or cord cutting is here and is here to stay. Next one, we saw this was interesting. We've been watching you UVerse. We've been anticipating that AT&T UVerse would be the first one to drop out completely. And they did throw in the towel on it. And in fact, if you go to slide 28, this kind of looks at the top where people are actually going to. And it's surprising, YouTube TV. I didn't even know. Anybody got YouTube TV? Okay, well, that's good. Hopefully you have regular cable, right? We're not going to show the shaking of heads here. AT&T is now offering AT&T Now, which is a live streaming service. So on top of the YouTube or UVerse that they offer, they've now gone to this live streaming service in 2020. So my guess is that they would cut UVerse to get more bandwidth on their lines to provide more service to the streaming. So again, this isn't something that we're talking temporarily. Franchise fees will continue to go down as the cable cutting goes. And my guess is, we know Spectrum went to a cell phone company now. Makes sense because the internet to the cell phone piece is where it's going to be. So we wouldn't be surprised, if other cable companies become either bought out by a cell phone company or go that direction. So that's the grim outlook on franchise fees. As far as looking at the funding piece on slide 29, this is the revenues. Scott assures me that he stacked these on top, so it's showing you that Spectrum here does bring in the most for our revenue with AT&T coming in with the second most coverage area, but again, they are on the decline. Spectrum's pretty much been pretty slow at going down. AT&T has been the one that's dropping the fastest, and TDS again new to the world here, so they're on the up and up. Slide 30 just shows our other income coming in, so the public charges and then miscellaneous revenues, again, would be your interest payments, P-card pieces there. We're doing our best to try to fill the gap here, the overage of, or whatever doesn't cover our franchise fees. We're trying to make that up with public charges, advertising, that sort of thing. So while that number is going up, we would like to see that continue to go. Slide 31, expenses, again, just by type here, just giving you a couple different looks with the capital projects included and the staff costs included in this. And let me know if you have any questions. Obviously, we'll discuss this, and I can bring any of these back up when we get to that. Next one showing you the revenues and expense summary with the fund balance laid over top of it. Fund balance is basically if we had any, if we didn't have a deficit, we were putting our funds in there. Our fund balance has been used for our CIP projects. And then in recent years, the fund balances where if we do have a deficit, that's where the funds are coming out of to pay the deficit. And those funds are obviously decreasing at the same time the franchise fees are. So that's why we're before you tonight as these meet up. It's coming quicker than we were hoping. Operation expenses summary with the fund balance on slide 33. Again, just giving you another look here. Let me know if I'm missing anything, Scott. All right, perfect. Slide 34, just talking about the other funding options and considerations that we have talked about. Other stations have considered like a PBS model, so you could do, you can have people call in, you can do auctions, you can do that. Some PEG stations do that. Some do nonprofit or friends groups as a way to do fundraising, classes, memberships, advertising. A lot of people tie their advertising with their local sports coverage. One of the reasons that we did get into the sports, we wanted to show our high school sports, but it also could be a potential revenue piece to show off businesses that support whatever school district they're a part of. So we were looking into that. Some of them all put their franchise fees right in the general fund and don't even fund their stations whatsoever. So some municipalities don't even do what you guys are doing here or do it at a less of a piece there. And then a lot of people do production services like we're doing and just showing you what we're currently doing. We offer the memberships. We have the classes. Currently, most of the classes were free right now. we did run summer camps with kids. The numbers just kept going down for us for having the camps here. We were working with the library too up until last year. The library went a different direction. But that doesn't mean we still couldn't do classes in the future. And we wanted to do more classes out, not here at City Hall. Most of our classes were being done here at City Hall. We wanted to take it out and about. We have laptops for that, so something we'd want to do and probably keep free. We really wanted to take the technology and put it in everybody's hands if we could. And again, we have our traditional TV advertising model, similar to what you would see on a mainstream a TV station and production services. So those are the other funding pieces that we're trying here at Fact TV or have tried with some success, but it's still early on in our story. So it's hard to say with the franchise fees dropping and trying to increase the revenues at the same time. It's a battle, right? So we're doing our best. Just looking at what we had for a budget for this year, so we have been showing you our numbers up to 2019. This is what the adopted budget looked like. I'm hoping tonight, if you do have questions about where we're at currently, we can talk with Misty and tell you where we're at. With COVID, we're also holding back on purchases and stuff, kind of sitting back and waiting to see what's going on. So, we're doing similar to what other departments are doing. But this kind of gives you the snapshot of what we have. And then you guys have our CIP currently. So this is that. I know it doesn't come in as clear as it should, but you guys have the CIP in front of you right now for 2021. So we'll wait to hear from you. So what does the future hold for us? What we know, franchise fees will continue to decline with no end in sight. And again, some point we know they will discontinue. Our franchise fees will be reduced. Oops. I should just look there. We're will be reduced by down to 4% by 2021, and then that will continue through 2029, with the state making up that percentage through 2029 of the gross receipts from 2019. Again, that 30,000, but that's not gonna do it for payment. Streaming TV through the internet, over-the-top devices, Apple TV, Roku, others. That's going to increase, and again, they don't have to pay any franchise fees whatsoever, so that plays into the franchise fees going away. And then the franchise fee, the fund balance will not cover the budget deficit after 2022, based on the fund balance that we have currently with the CIP projects planned, and that's why we are before you. The backup plan for mainstream funding must be developed if the franchise fee, not French fries, franchise fees are eliminated or reduced. So we have to we have to do something, because it's out of our control. Our goals are simple: is to keep up with the current technology, replace outdated equipment with the most cost and effective equipment. No repeats of 2010. We don't want to close our doors or go back to what it was. We want to keep it moving forward. Provide access to government meetings for our community and official record. Inform, educate the city through our news coverage, classes, and other services for our residents. We want to keep up on the things we're doing currently that are working well. And then our continuing goals: provide all city departments with multimedia services, assist with outreach requests as needed, maintain the staffing levels for our department. They're right where we need them to be at this time. We have three full-time, 2 part-time positions, or seasonal, however we describe those positions. And then, oops, I jumped the gun here. I got that. Sorry, I screwed up my piece there. Deliver high-quality product to our community through the evolving avenues. Again, we want to stick to where we're at, keeping the quality that we can with the funds that we have, and keep our department, keep it growing, keep the outreach growing, keep the coverage going, and keep up what you guys expect us to do moving forward. Future funding, possible options. These would be some of the options to put out there. We'll discuss this, obviously, but basically we can increase our services by adding resources to raise revenues and increase rates for production activities. So do what we are doing now, but we would need to add more staff, to increase our plans for selling advertising and whatnot. We don't have the funding to do that, so we're not sure that that's the best option, but it is an option out there. Immediate transition to the general fund and capital projects fund, so we are partially or fully paid by the property taxes. So you could just move our whole department over to the general fund, gradual transition to the general fund and capital projects. So you could slowly bring us over if that's what you choose. Or you could look at reducing the services to meet the franchise fee fund levels. So we're kind of meeting that middle piece there. Considerations, Misty can talk about the levy limit concerns and expenditure restraint, that your program limitations with state aid, expected level of service to the community. So where we're at today, are we meeting those needs and want to continue to meet those needs as it is today? And obviously the time-sensitive piece of this, it's happening faster than we were hoping. So there's not can't wait too long on this. So the next steps, and I'll open up for questions, are just are there other possible options that we should consider that I haven't discussed here? How should we discuss, or how should this discussion proceed moving forward? And should the decision be made soon, or should we wait till the money runs out? That's what I have for you. Questions? A lot of information.
Okay, so I want to thank you, Jeremy, for your presentation, and I want to tell my fellow Alder that I have been working with this great team of people from almost a year continually with the program that we are producing for the Latino community, and I will tell you I am very happy that we have a very professional group of people, dedicated, concerned to the community, always looking for options how we can serve the community. So I know that they work hard, very hard, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because you're helping me and Lupita with our show. But I see firsthand working with them from the last year how they are, they're doing a great job. So I think that we should be proud of the team that we have in the city. We should be proud of the way they are reporting our news. So, and I always say that our municipality, our city is very transparent. Almost all our meetings are recorded. So when people say that we have secret meetings, I don't know. I never participate in a secret meeting because everything is recorded by Jeremy and his team. So, I think that this is an important conversation that we need to have as a group and determine how we are going to help them. You mentioned that your breaking even year is going to be 2023, isn't it? When? Isn't it, Misty?
2022 is what we're anticipating.
2022, okay. So, and for them, we need to determine how we are going to fund you. And it's going to be part of the general fund, and tax levy is going to be the source of your funding. So I have some idea, but I want to first listen from the other alders. If you have any question, ideas, we want to go first.
If I could, Julia, I would just say the other thing that Jeremy hasn't talked about is how important they've been during this pandemic to provide services to not only all of our residents and all of us, but also to staff. I mean, that's been a key thing they've helped out a lot with, and you really see the value and importance in a situation like this where, half the people are online right now, and without them here, that's something that we'd really struggle to do. So, I just, again, kind of echo some of the stuff that Julie said too, that, we want to be transparent, we want to be accessible for people throughout the city, and to be able to see what we're doing and know what we're doing, and they're integral to that piece.
I have a question.
Okay, so who is going first, Randy, and then Dorothy? Okay.
All right. I just want to echo the mayor's comments. I do thank you as well for it provides transparency for not only this body here, but committees and everything up and beyond. So I was amazed when I first came in and just to understand how this all works. And I would like to take you up on your offer as far as a tour sometime. But what do other municipalities, what are they must be confronted with the same issue. Have you been in touch with them? Or maybe they're just, maybe since we're not involved with that municipality, maybe they're just not as involved as Fact TV is in their own municipality. Can you answer that?
I can. I've served on, we have the Wisconsin Community Media, which is the Wisconsin's group of PEG stations. I've served on the board, ran our Dane County group for several years to try to work through some of these issues together. I always thought it would be something that we should have taken on as all municipalities for outreach about PEG in general. I would say as far as stations in Dane County, Sun Prairie and Madison and us would be the kind of the ones that have made the investment a long time ago. I mean, this is something that you would have had to invest in years and years ago to be where they're at today. Sun Prairie also added radio several years ago. There was a time where FCC opened up the window for radio. I don't know that we would have even had a shot because of being so close to the radio station here in the frequencies. I don't know if that would have been a possibility for us. That window's closed. But they've really been able to drive in more community members to work through that station, and they rely on membership fees or fees for people to come in and do radio shows. They also have a big kids piece of it, so they have Kids 4. It's a whole channel dedicated to kids programming, so the kids pay to come in and do shows, so they get revenues on that front. They don't cover as many meetings as we do, but they have they're part of the school district, so they can cover some of their things. I just saw that they're starting a news program, so it made us feel good because we've been the only news program that we knew of in Wisconsin doing a daily news program. So to see that come forward from there is pretty cool. And as far as I know, Jeff over there is the director at Sun Prairie Media, and they're getting all their franchise fees, but they were in a similar situation where their franchise fees are going away. They did get TDS in their whole city, so they just got a brand new franchise. They're seeing increased fees there because of TDS coming into their cities, so a little bit different there. City of Madison has a channel as well. Their funding is, from my understanding, it's all in the general fund, so they're not, the fees just go right in the general fund, and then they submit in a budget. They cover, all their meetings similar to what we do here, and then I believe anything else that's not a meeting is paid services that they charge to go out to like the Monona Terrace or other areas, but they're basically focused in on stuff related to internal use and city meetings. Monona would be the next one coming in, kind of close. Their station's based out of the school district. They did get a radio station as well, so they're kind of split on what they're doing. But mostly the other, like Oregon, has, I think, just a couple of employees, and they're based out of the high school now. So they're all, it kind of goes down from there. I would say after that, it's 1 to 2 people for the station, and either they're doing a couple of meetings, a couple of school events, and that's it. Nothing close to what we're doing here.
Okay. I'm just, I'm concerned as to what may be taking place in other municipalities. When I come here to Fitchburg and being a fairly new alder person, I just expect transparency, and that's all I see here. Maybe not all the constituents watch, but it is available. I mean, at committees, city council, and you would think other communities would expect it as well. But maybe that we just have such a high standard, maybe. But I think it's a given here, And if there's any way that we as a council can carry that forward, I think it's very important. So I guess that's something that we'll have further discussion on. But thank you for what you do and your staff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, next, Dorothy.
Yeah, we are incredibly spoiled here. We get every city meeting is recorded and very many available streaming live, all of them available streaming over computer on demand. Nowhere has that I'm aware of. I'm not certain exactly how many meetings Madison does. I know county board, the only meeting that is recorded is the county board meeting itself. None of the standing committee meetings are video recorded. None of any other meetings are recorded at all. So the citizen availability that we have for watching meetings after the fact, if it's not convenient to show up or whatever, is just really incredible. We should be proud as a city that exists. And our residents and the council and the city gets it for free because it has been paid all these years by these franchise fees. The city has not been paying into it at all, period. Which to me is like, whoa, we're getting it for free, okay? One of the nasties that happened soon after I was elected, they had quite a substantial capital fund that when particularly the fire department wanted to beef up the 911 system, the city decided it was okay to dip into Fact TV's capital fund and grab $1 million out of that to beef up the 911 system in Fitchburg. So not only do we get all this for free from Fact TV, but we actually dipped in and took $1 million of their money. So I feel absolutely fine about saying, you know, the city really owes picking up the bill for a while for Fact TV and help them continue providing a fabulous service that they do.
Any other comment? Sarah.
Jeremy, I know you mentioned that if you sought out more advertising or potentially that PBS model, it would require more staff just because it would require more time. But beyond that, I guess, is that even a consideration that would appeal to you? Or what is your opinion on that specific option?
Yeah, we switched when we switched our programming on our community channel. We were I just want to set this up. We were broadcasting. We basically would go out and tape whatever event was happening, play it its entirety, and then go back to our community bulletin board. And what we felt like is that wasn't really going to keep the interest of the residents who were tuning in, if they were tuning in to watch our community programming. We didn't feel like if once they finished, they would go to this community bulletin board and we would lose them because it's just it's a PowerPoint slideshow. So when we decided to go to this model of advertising, it had to be that we were going to go and inject commercials in. We had to cut up our programming. It was a big investment for staff time to do it. So getting it set up took a couple of years. What I thought would be a little bit easier is going out and asking for money. It was not as easy as I predicted, and the time commitment to follow up on that is significant. So when I brought Scott on board to do I didn't ask him to do the advertising. That was going to be me. I stepped away and would try to follow these businesses, and what it became was, it's a full-time job, meeting them, going back, talking with them, follow-ups, and coordination, and it just without proving to the businesses, and I'm a business owner on the side as well, without showing ROI for them in some way, I just couldn't get that pitch for them to buy into. Why should I advertise on Fact TV when you can't tell me who's watching Fact TV? Was a harder thing to pitch. So, when I put that in as a consideration for us to do, yes, I think it's a full-time person that's going out and asking for money, whether it's a fundraising piece, to buy into getting advertising pieces. We have available packages for businesses to do. And again, we haven't had any takers. So the short answer is, we're only 2 years. 2018 was kind of the really big launch into that, and we weren't successful so far. So far, no, it hasn't been successful, and I don't know. Moving forward, continuing to go out and ask for funding, specifically against the TV programs that we're creating, such as the news and stuff. Is that the best part of my time? Is it to go out and sell advertising, or is it to cover the community events, continue our coverage there? So kind of got torn there. So hopefully that answers your question. The short answer is it probably could use a little bit more time, but it would definitely need more staff time to do that selling piece.
I have a question.
Gabriela, and then you, Dorothy, okay?
So thank you for what you guys do for the city. I really love what you do. I'm very supportive of it. It was really interesting to see the whole history, and I, like Randy, would love to do a tour. I got to go back there last council meeting. It was very cool just walking through, so I'm excited to actually get a tour. But there's a couple of things that I'm curious about. So I actually am a nonprofit fundraiser. That's my profession. And so when you talk about the PBS model, that really scares me, because good fundraising is it takes a lot of investment, and that just seems like it seems like an avenue I wouldn't recommend going down. So it seems to me that video production potentially has some potential. So I'm curious about if you think that there's capacity of your staff to do any sort of significant additional video production. Is that even really truly a possibility or area for growth?
Well, I think you got to consider a couple of things. The competition in Dane County is significant. In fact, Scott came out of the private industry, so it was nice to actually bring in somebody who had many years in that industry. Same with me, I came out of the private industry as well, knowing that the competition's very stiff here in Dane County. We also have a lot of video production companies in Fitchburg, and so there's that balance. I know we were talking with the consultant about this. What's that balance where you don't want to steal business from them, but we're also going to undercut them a little bit too, because we're a government entity, so we got to be kind of flexible. I mean, our prices as it stands is very small for an hour. We charge, I believe, $50 an hour.
Oh my gosh.
Which is a steal.
Yeah.
Also, we don't take every project that comes to us either. We have some priorities. So, I don't want to mention the names. Well, I guess public. I mean, we've got some local businesses that we work with that we're helping out here in Fitchburg, and that's our focus, is to work with Fitchburg businesses and doing that. But I would say we would need more staff. I mean, Scott basically is filling that need with a couple of clients that we do have. We would have to it would take more staff, I think, to pull them off of their daily duties of doing the meetings or the news coverage. The news coverage is basically a body, right? Yeah. Andrew is our Talking Fitchburg guy. I just happen to come in and host it. I basically jump in, produce it, leave, move on to the next task. So I don't. We offer it, and a lot of municipalities that have PEG stations offer it, but I don't know of any of them that it's their prime income or is making up the difference of doing that.
Yeah, is the video production services I guess the thing I'm thinking about is the fact that video ads on Facebook are huge right now. Those 6 or 10 second ads are what businesses do. Was that sort of something that we could do for Fitchburg businesses that'd be willing to pay for? That seems like something that you could do easily. A business wouldn't necessarily know how. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I mean, the way we have it out there for our services, we just say we have video production services. So whatever is under under that service or under that umbrella is the sky's the limit. I mean, we have a studio, we have 2 studios that we can offer up. We have green screen, we have the professional cameras, we have the equipment to do all the production work. So the sky's the limit. So short, yeah, I mean, we could
you could do anything like
under the video production, short of doing a $1 million commercial or, you know, big commercial piece. But
Jeremy, we could do the $1 million commercial.
you're right. I'm underestimating our talent.
So, okay, I'd love to chat with you in the future, but we can move on. A couple other questions. You know.
Gabriela, can you speak to the microphone? Because
Oh, I'm sorry.
I cannot hear you very well.
Yeah, a couple other questions. I guess I can take this. So a couple other questions. Is recording meetings for other municipalities something that's a possibility? Like Dorothy said that none of the Dane County committees are recorded, and I'm not even sure if they would be interested in that, but that you guys are experts in recording municipalities or county meetings. So is that a possibility?
We have actually talked about this. Again, we would need more staff to do it, to be able to do it, but short answer would be yes, we could. We have camera kits and the stuff we would need to go out and cover those meetings. And in fact, we have covered other, like if Dane County comes in, let's just say Dane County Parks has something nearby here and we find it valuable, we'll go out and film it and do that. But definitely other municipalities could ask us to come in and help. I know in suburban Minneapolis, they have like a station, you know, in one of the cities, but it actually feeds 5 cities, and they serve that capacity to help film, you know, all of the 5 other municipalities, but it all centralizes out of one location. Something that we could look into.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if there was enough desire for it to necessitate a staff member and create enough profit. That would be an interesting thing to look into. And then my last question, I guess, was, is there any revenue source related to podcasting? Or like Spotify or iTunes? I know there's a different format.
So in fact, we can actually, we have that feature in our system. We've not turned it on. It is something that we have the capabilities of doing. We just haven't gotten into it. Again, I would have to do some research into could we turn it into a profit? I think that's where the question comes in from you guys. Do you want your government entity to be out there, you know, doing the profit end or trying to bring in money to cover the cost for the department? If that's what you want us to do, I think, you know, certainly we can do that.
Yeah.
But that's you decide us to go that route, then, you know, I would tell you what it would take to do it, and we could talk about it. But certainly podcasting is definitely a hot button item right now, and it's something that I've heard the senior center is interested in trying some podcasting, and it's something that we could look into for sure.
Good. Yeah, I personally would. I sometimes miss the Talking Fitchburgs because I don't watch the video, but if it was on my podcast feed, I would listen to everyone. So FYI, I will at least be your
I'm going to hold you to
listener.
that. All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Dorothy?
Yeah, that brings up a couple of other things for me. One of the things that you should ask, Jeremy, is to find out how much Madison charges the county for recording meetings. I know one of the reasons the county doesn't, even though they're in the same building as Madison City Channel, they say it's too expensive. What Madison wants to charge the county is cost prohibitive. So we might want to think about our fee schedule based on some of that in part. One of the things that I thought about in line with a lot of what Gabriella was asking is whether we want to try to expand offerings to businesses to record meetings and some of the more almost socially kind of things that businesses do instead of just saying short commercials or whatever. But we could, I know we've got at least 2 studios, one at the library and one here. I think there used to be one in the Fitchburg Room as well. So we have rooms that are set up with studios and cameras and everything ready and just sitting there. able to record meetings. The other question that I had for you is what would be either the cost or the revenue involved in pushing some of our stuff to a YouTube channel?
So we put our stuff out on YouTube already. There's no cost to put out to YouTube. So we're putting our videos on Facebook and YouTube at this time. So I don't know that there's a revenue piece there. If people were to click on it 1,000 times, then there might be a payback, but I don't think that, I'm not sure the question on the YouTube one. The other one for recording meetings, we're already doing that for some of the businesses. We go to their location and do record their meetings and then give it back to them. So it's something that, yes, we could, not only could they rent the space here, but they would, if they come here, they would have to rent the space from the rec department and then pay for us as well to do the production work. So it would be a good for two departments actually if they were to do that.
So I want to mention that I know for sure the McFarland municipality, they outsource all the video production to a private business to record all the meetings. So they don't have what we have in Fitchburg. One thing I am, in the worst case scenario that we, all the we need to, all the budget from Fact TV had to come to the general fund. Can we do something similar, Misty, that we do with the IT department? Because the Fact TV is providing city department with multi-services, okay? So I don't know if each department can be allocate a percentage of, their budget to pay for, for Fact TV services, like IT does. You know what I mean? Like it's something that you developed in the last couple of years. So, could be something like that. We can do something like that to, cover costs according to how they are providing service to each department. The other thing is, I think I don't know, Jeremy, do you charge the Fitchburg Chamber when you go and do all the recording for them?
We do not.
Okay. So I know that Fact TV also is in all the ribbon cutting and all this that the chamber does. I don't know if we can have a partnership with the chamber and, and say, you know what, maybe it's time that you share some of the costs that they have.
I would just say,
I don't know.
Not to interrupt, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. As far as the chamber goes and what we're doing with them, the only show is the Business Before 9. That's the only thing we're taping monthly. As far as like ribbon cuttings and or other business related items, they're not inviting us to come out there, so we don't come out there, or we go out in our own capacity and cover it. There's some issues that have been there. The one year I put in our report, we went to 75 of their events and we didn't see one of their events shared on their Facebook page or YouTube page, and we said, what's going on with that, we were out there and you say we're a partner with you, but you don't share so the relationship is there. It would be interesting to offer, we could definitely do that, but I don't know that the chamber would buy into that. They have hired out, and again, they've hired outside production companies to do work for them, which is unfortunate because it could have been something we could have done, but that's at their board and their choice. It's not part of, we weren't asked.
Okay. So. And the other thing that I was thinking outside the box, maybe, I don't know if you can, Madison College has a program about, broadcasting. I don't know that, but maybe partnership with them to do internship for the kid that they are doing this, the program to use the installation and and have some sort of partnership that involves some revenues. I don't know. I am thinking, but I really think that we want to know, Jeremy, what do you want from us? And how fast do you want and I know the time, 2022, but I really think that the service that you provide and your department provide is very important for the city, for the community, and I think that we need to consider the funding and to look how we can do it. But something that is something that we need to start talking and making a decision, because in the next 2 years is coming soon, and so I know that you're charging some of the production to the Verona School District. You're providing those services, and so but how much that represent in your general budget? Is like 2%, 10% of your budget?
I mean, yeah, yeah. To answer your question on Madison College, I graduated from the program there, the Vicom program, and we did have them we did try that type of service early on, and unfortunately the students just didn't, it didn't work out. So we did try to have students come in. We tried to reach out to UW, didn't have success on that front either. So we have tried to offer internships. We even offered them paid and couldn't keep them here. So let alone trying to get anybody for free, looking at the paid piece we tried, didn't work out. And the direction they're going is not necessarily they took the intern program away, all that stuff. So that didn't work out. I mean, as far as what we're asking for, we have to cover the fact of the matter is that the franchise fees are declining, and we have to find a new revenue source to cover the services that FactTV offers the city of Fitchburg. And I think short of moving the funds over to the Misty can jump in here. I mean, I don't, we've got some scenarios out there. I mean, ultimately, I think it's you guys get to decide, what direction is. But I think you've got to find a way or you got to know that the franchise fees are going to be gone at some point, and whether you start covering like maybe our CIP, maybe it's that comes out of the general fund to start. Maybe it's you off cost, whatever. The remainder costs that we come out with our budget, the deficit piece is covered to start. I think that's what we're asking you tonight is those are some of the scenarios we have as far as breaking the levy limits. Though that's over my head, so I would ask Misty to step in on that part because I don't know totally how that works.
And so ultimately what I see is the question being asked of you guys right now is, is FactTV a service that you want to continue to provide to the community? And what I'm hearing is yes, it's a great service that they're providing with the transparency and all of that. But with that high level of service comes a high cost. And so if that's something you're committed to, we're going to have to fit that within the budget. If you looked at that one graph that was revenues versus expenses with just the operating side, they're able to cover their operating side more or less with franchise fees. So from a levy limit perspective, moving that over to the general fund would be easy, but we also have to watch the expenditure restraint calculation and make sure we do that at a time where it doesn't hurt us in other areas. And then on the capital side, if you move that to capital projects fund, we'll have to be able to absorb that within another project. That won't happen. It's interesting having this presentation the same night as our financial management plan, because you heard earlier in the night that levy limits is going to be a really big struggle for us over the next couple of years, and then 5 years for sure, based on moving forward. And if you add this other thing in, it's going to be a bigger struggle, but that's where the council will have to decide their priorities.
But I have a question. So is mandatory to have meetings recorded? No?
No, it's not mandatory.
Okay. But
But it's
you know,
Yep.
no, because that one will be, if it's mandatory, but, okay. So, so it means that municipality can have meeting at closed door. Nobody know what happened. Okay.
No, you can't have closed door meetings, but they have to
Yeah,
be
you
open
know
to
what
the
I mean.
public, but they don't have to be recorded or videotaped.
Yeah, I know. But if nobody show up, you know what I mean? So the question is that we have in front of us is we want to eventually, continue with this service, and maybe they can go to the board row and decide what are the most critical services that they need to provide, and we want them to provide, and what are the services that there is we need to cut. You know what I mean? So do we need to ask the question, do we need all our meetings to be recorded? Do we want to be in the community all the time recording the stuff? Do we need to have all these shows that we are promoting and having? So it's going to be a difficult question, but, that one could be a good exercise to determine, how many hours of recording they have, how many meetings, how many weekly meetings, how many hours, and you know what I mean? And determine what are the essential and the more critical meetings that we want to continue to have, or the other option is, we really care about this department, we care about what they're doing, and we want to continue doing what they're doing, and then we need to make the sacrifice, and, we know that we need to absorb it in our general fund, and we need to look for options to see how we can cut how we can make it work. So that one is it's going to be a very difficult decision to make, but we are talking about, I don't know how many people that we have in the team. I think 4.
There's 5 staff.
5. Who is the other one?
You've got myself, Scott, Andrew, Bamlet, Chad, and then
Okay.
George.
So, so that one is, something that we need to consider, and maybe, I don't know, we can come with this solution tonight, but maybe have another meeting in the future, and because we need to, it's not going to affect the 21 budget, but then it's going to affect the 22 budget. Isn't it, Misty? 22 budget or 23? 22? So I think between now and next year, August, we need to make a decision.
Yeah. Julie, I just had one comment to make.
Yeah.
It's Gabriella. I'm thank you for coming and speaking with us, because I think this is a really important context for me to have going forward, and especially as I'm new and am looking at the next couple of years, is something I'm going to be thinking on, and I'm glad that we have, I know it's not a lot of time, but we do have a couple of years to think through this and really be deliberate about it, so I'm certainly going to be thinking about it, and I hope we can continue that conversation.
Absolutely.
So thank you. I really appreciate it, and thanks for setting it up, Julie. I really appreciate it, so that we could have this beginning of this conversation.
So what does the other alders think about this? Especially the one that they haven't not spoken yet. Who's gonna, no, Dorothy, let's see someone else gonna speak.
I'm just kind of thinking on ways to, trying to brainstorm. I don't really have any questions right now, but, I think you guys are really important. You guys do a great job for our community and getting the word out. But, it was a lot to take in tonight, so I just gotta let it sink in a little bit and see if maybe I have some other ideas or questions or ideas, you know. But that's kind of where I'm standing.
Who else? Tom, you have been here for a long time. You're next, Sarah.
I guess the service is very valuable to the city. There's no question about it. I don't think anybody in this room is going to say it's not, because it goes out to the community and it goes out to all the residents which we represent. But the thing is as far as the budget goes, I mean, and let's see what the mayor puts in the budget. If an alder has to bring up a topic, you can bring it up at that time. As far as cable goes, you're not going to answer this question tonight because we don't have any numbers in front of us. The budget's going to be tough as it is. You're going to have to find money. I can already hear Misty say something. When you put something in, you got to take something out. How did I do? How was that? Pretty good, wasn't it? So for the new alders, that's what we've done in the past. When you put something in, you're going to be taking something out. Why? Because the money's not there. So to answer your question, Julie, I guess I'm going to wait to see the budget, and I think that's what we all have to do. Let's just see what the numbers are, see what the mayor presents, and go from there. I do have a comment for you, though, coming up here in the fall. I think it's real important to the community, and I'm not on the school board, but when the school starts, you talk to the representatives from the different school districts and put out to the public the change that the school is going to bring. My daughter lives in Wildwood South, and she's already brought up to me that school's changing. Parents are talking. It's a whole different ballgame out there. So my comment is maybe you talk to all the school districts and just put that out maybe before school. I think that's real valuable to the city.
Yeah, I would. We've been lucky enough for the past couple of years to talk to each of the superintendents before the school year starts, kind of talk and have them share, what's happening, what should parents know this coming year, what's your projects you're working on. But this year, yeah, I can see Verona's. We have a pretty tight relationship with Verona, so I suspect if we haven't already, there'll be a video that's coming soon on that front. But yes, I absolutely agree with you that we'll be spending a lot of time on that transition for sure.
Sarah.
Yeah, just to be brief, I think you guys do a great job. I think you bring a lot of transparency to the city, and you just offer a lot of services for education, like Tom just said. Getting out school information is really important. So without a doubt, see the value, but just don't know exactly where things fit in because, like Tom just said, it is just sacrifices have to be made because there's just a limited amount of funds. So I just think this was really educational and it's really important, but we just need more time to digest.
Joe.
Ditto to the rest of the alders about the value of Fact TV. Also wanted to know if it seems like there's some level of uniqueness to Fact TV, and wondering if there had ever been, inquiries beyond just Wisconsin, but like if it's ever been recognized sort of beyond Wisconsin, and if there is any type of possibility to capitalize off of that and potentially generate revenue for, training another community somewhere in development of, this type of service.
So we would, I'm sorry, So is the first question, have we been recognized nationally, and then could we train other municipalities? Is that?
Correct.
Gotcha. We stopped. So Wisconsin Community Media has a video fest. If anybody who's toured our areas, maybe seen some of the awards in there. We stopped submitting because it costs money to submit for awards. So we stopped doing that a couple of years ago, and we've never. We also are a member of the Alliance for Community Media, which is a national organization. And in fact, the conference that I went to several years ago, there was a session that talked about bringing local news to your community. And I have those notes right there, and that's it was from that conference that actually I was so taken away. Like I never thought about us actually doing news, and so from that front, yeah, I don't know, across the. I watch the emails every day from everybody talking, but it'd be interesting to see. We've never nationally been recognized for what we do, and it's because we don't pay to submit the awards, just that we don't have the budget to do it, so we haven't done that in a few years. So, but yeah, as far as training other municipalities, we've shared info with our Dane County groups and tried to brainstorm together and work on solutions. One of them was talking about doing a county-wide show where each of us submitted a story, and tried to spread the wealth about the importance, again, of your local community media, but that's as far as that has gone.
Okay, so what we can do is we can ask Jeremy to put together a list of all the services and hours, a complete budget, what are the revenue, expenses, more in categories, and then, we should have another meeting. The budget of the mayor this year is gonna be irrelevant because I think what we need to think is for the following budget. So, but it's something that maybe we need to recoup in a couple of months, and then to have more information from Jeremy, and then to have a more in-depth conversation about this topic, and because I think we need to make a decision in the next couple of months, in the next, 6 months, maybe, Misty? 6-8 months? So, do you agree with that plan of action? Yes, no?
Yep.
I guess I can just say too that I plan to at least partially address it in the budget, the operating budget. So when that comes out, I'm going to at least partially address it. And if people don't agree with how much I'm putting towards it, or we'll talk about it more at that point as well. But I don't think waiting a year is a very smart choice, because then you have no other options because they've used all of their balance that they have. So I'm going to at least partially address it in the budget this year.
Okay. Good point. Yeah. Because otherwise, if we don't, the worst case scenario, we say, we dismantle this department and that's it. This is the worst case scenario. The other one is to keep it. Otherwise, we need to find a compromise solution in the middle, And I know that it's going to be a hard decision, but this is what we need to think about that. And I don't know if we need to have input from the public. Do you think so or no?
Well, the public would have input during the budget discussion. So I think that would be a significant point for them to weigh in.
Okay. Because if the public wants to have it, continue with this service, if there's money, the tax money coming from them, so we need to, make the decision that we need to incorporate it in our budget. So Okay, so Jeremy, do you know what you need to do your homework?
I think I've got an yeah. I think I got it. I would suggest again if you guys could come and visit, I could answer some, we can go through some of what we do and the services. I would definitely advise you to read the 2019 annual report. We spent a lot of extra time identifying the services in there. And the last couple of reports do have the numbers of how many meetings we covered, the time, the shows, the hours. That's all been identified in those reports. So when we do have those numbers as well, that I'll put together for a report.
Jeremy, can you send a link with that report? Because we have a couple of new alders that they haven't seen that report.
For the annual reports and the links?
Yes. Can you send a link to the council so we can read that,
I will check in and see where I can find those.
Okay, thank you.
Or just send you, I'll get them to you.
Yeah, the link, Okay, so any other comment, discussion? We are at the end of the agenda, it's 9:38. So, okay, so.
Motion to
the
adjourn?
next item.
Oh.
Does anyone want to talk?
No. I was just saying motion to adjourn. I didn't know there was.
Okay. So the next item in the agenda is announcement, and our next committee of the whole, it will be July 22nd, and that one is going to be Mistin is coming back, isn't it? Mistin is back. And then the second part of the meeting will be talking about the police department overview, and Chad Brecklin is going to be presenting that. And then I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Nay. The motion carries. So thank you very much. And